What determines the valuation of a company that is between 12 and 14 million? How do they know that that's the number?
At its most basic form, it's EBITDA, which is basically earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. It's basically all the stuff you have left after all your expenses, which is your net profit, plus your add backs of things like owner expenses. Like every owner expenses certain things like, car expenses or whatever. So it's that number that drives a lot of the valuation. Now, there's multiple factors in addition to that. And if my CFO was listening, he's like, it's not that simple. It's additional value.
Simplify it, Ralph. Come on.
But for this podcast, let's just keep it on that. It's your earnings. And then it's a multiple of those earnings. And the larger those earnings are, typically the larger the multiple. And so for us, we're at, I think at that point, like 1.7 million on EBITDA. And we got like generally speaking, in and around like the 8 area. I'd have to go back and do the math, but it depended on sort of how they calculated it. But in essence, it was like a 7 or an 8 multiple, which now today, a company that size in the agency space might not get that multiple. You might get a 6 or a 7. So it's basically whatever your EBITDA is, like if it's 100 grand, it depends on the size too. So we were at that size where you could get a 6 to an 8. Something that's smaller than that, maybe $500,000 or less than $1 million, you might only be able to get a 3 to a 5 multiple, which is, let's say you're turning off $500K, in earnings. You might only get 1.5 million at a 3, or maybe my math is right, 2.5 million at a 5. So it depends on the value, the intrinsic value. I'm hearing my CFO in my head right now. It's the intrinsic value, Ralph. It's like, what do you do differently than everybody else? And that's a key. Do you have IP? Do you have all these other things? What's your churn rate? All these other things. But simple terms, that's what we got. We never went to the closing. So would it have been whittled down a little bit? Probably. But the cash at close wouldn't have been. It would have been the earnout side of it, which if you're thinking about taking one of those calls, like those are the numbers that you really care about, because those, like the cash at close is the number that you definitely 100% keep.
Right. There's a lot of ways to lose the earnout, right? Is it kind of like the insurance companies where they're going to try to evade paying the insurance as any way they can? Is it that kind of vibe when you're going through the earnout?
I haven't gone through it all the way, but I have friends who have. And fortunately, because we shopped ourselves not to hundreds or dozens of strategic buyers, but probably about a dozen, I would say, is that there are ways in which, let's say, hey, if you get to this level of earnings in your first year with us, if you only hit this metric, you get this number. There's always ways to negotiate. Hey, if it's 90% of that number, 80% of that number, let's say 90%, you get a little bit less. If it's 80%, you get a little bit less. So there are ways in which to structure the earnout, and that's what a good broker and a good lawyer will help you with. We would have baked that into the cake. It wouldn't have been an all or nothing kind of thing, but the smaller you are, the less leverage you have. We're in that area where we were like, 1.5, 1 to 7. So we didn't have that much leverage. All of a sudden, when you're getting into like the 3 to 4 to 5 million EBITDA, which maybe to some of your listeners is like, I can't even think that big. It's like you have more leverage. It's all about leverage with these folks, because they're the ones that are cutting the checks. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, but there are ways to get around it. It's never an all or nothing on the earnout. If it is an all or nothing, I would negotiate that as hard as possible.
Right. Yeah, I wanted to highlight this idea of the uncertainty around the stuff that you don't get at close, because I think somebody sells their company for $12 million, you get 8 at close, and then I'm going to get 4 over time. Well, maybe not. Maybe you don't get any more money, right? There's like, that's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've gone into the acquisition part of this. And when I first heard this, I thought the combination of the fact that you get more money based on how much your EBITDA is. So as that EBITDA goes up, the multiplier goes up. It seems like you could collect some smaller agencies, and then what started out small, because like when they're added on to the original agency, all of a sudden we're in a new multiplier. So you're like kind of the sum of the parts is worth more than them individually.
100%. Yeah. I mean, I think in that presentation I showed, it's like, you reach a certain level, you either, you can sell outright, you can just continue doing what you're doing and kind of blow things up and figure out how to get past that plateau that you're at, or you potentially merge with other companies. So
Right.
if you are very good at Facebook ads or Meta ads or TikTok, and then there's another agency that's in your same space, instead of them being competitors or maybe referral partners, talk to them about combining forces. All of a sudden you take two companies with $250,000 in EBITDA, all of a sudden you're at 500, you're on your way. And then maybe add a social media marketing agency, and then a design agency, and then maybe a content marketing, SEO, like network. And that's why groups like yours are so important. It's like, start thinking like that. You don't necessarily have to do all the growing yourself. Now, the flip side of that is that you then get a partner. So if you're smaller and you're grouping together and you're trying to create your own conglomerate together, I think it's a super smart way to go. That's how I would do it. Right now, what we do is we look for areas of expertise that we want to be the best in the world at, but also they're in demand based upon our current user base, or our current customer base, our current prospect base, and then we add those in. So we added a Google agency this past year, and most of this is like stock in most cases, because we're all shooting for the big goal of everyone becoming a multimillionaire, right? At the big goal of like 100 million valuation, all that sort of stuff. So we added a Google agency, we merged with a creative agency, and with that, we kind of secondarily got a social media marketing and email agency, which was great, like all in 1 year. So, yeah, and I know some companies like, I don't know if I necessarily believe it, but there's other larger agencies that say that they acquire like 20 agencies in a year. I think most of that's bullshit. But anyway, the point is like, you can do this so that you're not spending a whole lot of money cash out of pocket, because you're all kind of going for the same thing. And that's the big thing. When I talk in front of agency groups, I talk about that. It's like, hey, if this isn't good for you, then that's fine. If it isn't good for us, then that's fine too. But what I would do is, if I was smaller, I would absolutely look at my competitors, as well as, like, there's no SEC violation for an agency that's 500,000 to merge with another one that is in the same space, serving the same customers. Instead of fighting against each other, just merge together. Like, right. It would be so simple. Though I think a lot of folks don't really think about it that way. They think, I'm going to grow organically as opposed to merging with my competition or buying them out potentially, depending on the size. So yeah, I think it's a great alternate strategy.
This ability, when you add on the first example you gave with adding on some of these services, it's like you've got their clients, so you've got their additional revenue and their additional profit that's coming through. But also you have the ability now to cross-sell their services to your existing client base and vice versa, right? So it's more than just the additional profit. It's like the additional profit times what other additional services are now available that weren't previously.
Yeah, you're starting to think like a private equity group,
right?
Which people aren't familiar with that term, definitely Google it. But I mean, that's where all the money in the world is right now. Trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars just sitting there, like larger than the New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ combined. Like, that's how much money is in private equity, just sitting there. So like, the amount of money that's there is unfathomable. Put that aside for a second. Like, if you can create your own little conglomerate in the agency space for, let's say you're a roofing agency in Charlotte, North Carolina, and there's another guy that's in Roanoke, Virginia that does the same thing. Well, like, bringing your stuff together, getting somebody potentially, the key is with us is that sounds all easy, but you do need someone to merge it together. So one of the things that we did go out and we purchased this person. He's now a very valid member, like a hugely important part of our staff, as we purchased an integrator. It's like that integrator, like, not only do they integrate the company, but they integrate, if they have the experience, they can integrate two different companies together, and you and the other CEO can go do your visionary stuff. So having the types of people that can help you along the way, I think, is helpful, and giving them a stake in the business, provided it's the right person, was the path that we went.
Yeah. I know in your world, this is common conversation, but I know from our listeners, I think it's underserved and they don't talk about this enough.